Well, hey everyone, welcome back to Apocalypse here on this fourth Sunday of Advent. We haven't done one of these live streams in a while, but I have on today one of my good buddies, Jared Thomason, from the It Means What It Means podcast. Jared, how are you today?
I'm well. Thanks for having me, John.
Of course. Yeah, so today really we're going to be reflecting on a conversation that happened between Sean McDowell and William Lane Craig on Andrew Rillera's book, Lamb of the Free. For those of you who follow this channel or have been following this channel, you probably know that I have 3 fairly lengthy review videos of that conversation between those two guys. And it was a lot to go through. And just wanted to take some time to kind of like step back and kind of reflect on that, since it's been a couple of weeks since I released the last one. And I thought I'd have Jared on, who's a wonderful podcast host, a wonderful thinker, very, very sharp, even though he'll tell you he's not. So Jared, welcome for the first time on this show.
Yeah.
And it would be great if you could just tell the audience a little bit about yourself, your background a little bit, how you got interested in the strange world of biblical studies, and then maybe even a bit about why you decided to start your podcast.
I'll preface with, if my dogs hear a noise outside, even a twig snap, they will freak out. So I may have to pause and grab them something to chew on.
Totally.
So I'm Jared. I grew up evangelical, mostly attending Baptist churches with some brief forays into Methodist churches in the South. There's not that much difference. And as a teenager, got really into Bible study, which turns into theology, right? Because that's the next vine you can swing on. And then in my early 20s, really started to hate like topical Bible studies, topical sermons, things like that. Started to learn more about biblical studies. So bridging from theology into biblical studies. And then, so it was 29, I think, when this particular conversation happened. But my son and I were coming home from church one Sunday, and he said, "Daddy, if God made everything, who made God?" And I thought I was ready for that question in particular. And there were a lot of stressors in my life, a lot of emotional turmoil at that moment, and I realized I did not have the bandwidth to deal with what I knew was he was going to hear when he asked that question of others, a lot of talking that amounted to, I don't know. And also it would indicate to him he needs to stop asking questions, because there's a place where you can't keep going. And so I stepped away, didn't really engage with Bible or anything for a few years. About a year before that, I'd had the idea with a friend of mine named Daniel, who's been a guest on the podcast a couple of times, that we would do kind of what would become Data Over Dogma. But he'd be the subject matter expert, and I would be the curious guy who's asking him all these questions. So he would be the Dan, and I would be the Dan, and that didn't happen because in 2011 it was really difficult to set up a podcast. Jump forward 2020, 2021. I can really only be at home or work because there's nothing out there to do. And he and I started having conversations about Jacob Milgram, Ryan Stokes. But I think most of the conversations were around, he's like, there's this guy, Douglas Campbell, a friend of mine named Chris Tilling, does a lot of work with him. And he was telling me about this. And I was like, hey, we should start the podcast. He said, nope, I don't want to do that. That's too much work. So I decided to just start cold calling people in 2023. And yeah, I think the Journal of Biblical Literature has been the easiest way to do that, because I'll just throw an email out there. Yeah, so the idea initially was, I'm asking experts questions about biblical studies. And then I realized I do want to widen this out. And I'd kind of like to talk to somebody from every tradition that engages with biblical texts. And then eventually my wife convinced me, well, you could just do whatever you want. So I did have a fantasy author on. I planned to, because I would run things by her, like, should I do this? And she would be like, it's your podcast, do whatever you want. No one's judging you. And yeah, so now I'm just kind of coming across anything I can to talk to people about either their expertise or their tradition. So I don't know if that's a good summary, but
No, yeah, thank you. And we're gonna have all the links and stuff in the description to where people can actually find you and listen to your catalog of stuff, because you've had some really awesome people on. And I will just say, one of whom you've already mentioned, who we both know now.
yeah,
What was recently on. And you released that on Patreon today. So
yes.
people want to see that, they can go to his Patreon, which will be linked in the description. And what were you going to say?
Actually, thank you. You're
Yeah.
better at promoting my podcast than I am. So actually, well, this is a big week. So today it's Campbell on Patreon. Tomorrow, also on Patreon. It's a preview of what I have recorded for 2026. So episodes will start releasing. It's the first 9. Well, I only have 9, but the first 9 weeks of 2026 are previewed there. And then Tuesday will be Alexiana Fry, who will be the first episode of 2026. But so today, tomorrow, Tuesday, and then Wednesday, the free release will be Peter Altman and Caio Perez talking about their Tyndale Old Testament commentary on Numbers.
Awesome.
Yeah, so it's a busy week.
Man. Yeah, sounds like it. Well, thank you for taking some time and jumping on for just a little bit to kind of reflect with each other. And kind of before we get in, even to setting the context, because I think you forgot to bring this up. I'm curious about how you heard about Andrew's book. If someone recommended to you, or if like how that sort of came on.
Well, so the first time I heard of him, Curtis Freeman, when I asked for recommendations at the end, he's like, there's this guy, look into his stuff. And then also Daniel Rodriguez again. So Daniel is cited in his dissertation, in Andrew's dissertation. And so he's like, oh, check this out. And he sent me a copy. I initially reached out to Andrew and said, hey, do you want to come on and talk about your dissertation? And he said, where did you get that? I was like, my buddy, which is the first indication that he is, like he's very conscious of his work.
Yeah.
And I think very particular about where he discusses it. He did agree. I think eventually in that conversation, I was like, well, okay, you get the book. I'd love to. So I'll get a copy and we'll coordinate that. And he was pretty upfront about like, hey, I don't really like this, which is kind of relevant to this conversation because and we've talked about this, you and I, but the debate bro culture is not his bag. He wrote this book. That's his contribution to the conversation. Yep. So yeah, a couple of mentions. I think Chris Tilling had also mentioned him. People were like, you should talk to them. You should talk to them. I'm like, I can only talk to people who say yes. So yeah, did have him on, and that was a treat.
Yeah. So that actually really beautifully gets us into kind of the context for what we're going to be talking about, which is the conversation between Sean McDowell, who is a famous apologist, son of a famous apologist as well, and then William Lane Craig, who is a credentialed philosopher and also an apologist at the same time. Those two things aren't mutually exclusive. So they came on Sean's show to discuss Andrew's book. And for context, I think what happened was, what was it? John Mark Comer, right? Posted something on, he's an evangelical pastor, posted something on Instagram tagging Andrew's book and praising it because he had struggled. So he's an evangelical pastor, so struggling with a lot of what was going on with evangelical sort of approaches to atonement, and found Andrew's book really helpful and useful. And this caused, as you would expect, backlash from other evangelicals online, to the point where people were, writing fairly bloggy kind of responses to Andrew's book, and then some more critical responses as well. So Derek Richmaui, who is a scholar as well, posted, or was, I'm assuming, asked to post something on the Gospel Coalition's website, kind of responding to Mark's concerns about penal substitution. And then Richmaui also wrote a review of Andrew's book as well, which Andrew is actually responding to. Because like you said, part of what Andrew does as a scholar, he cares a lot about how and in what kind of medium he's actually responding in and engaging with other scholars in. So he's not just going to go on a show with two people he doesn't even know who invite him on. He doesn't, like, there's no relationship of trust built there where he can be like, you know, this isn't just going to be a kind of gotcha situation or something like that, or two people ganging up on him, right? But where he can actually sit down and go through and write a response. And that's what he's done and been doing with Ishmaeli's stuff. And then Sean and William Lane Craig, as they say in their conversation, invited Andrew on, which is true. And Andrew denied the request, which is also true. But Andrew also has publicly explained why. And it's very much what you were saying. He does not want to get drawn into the sort of like Theo Bro kind of like debate space. That's not his thing.
Andrew Rillera dunks on.
Yeah. Like that. He is so revolted by that sort of vibe, right? Like he does not like that at all, which is just understandable. And they decided to do the conversation anyway without him, to talk about his book without him in the room. I do wonder what difference it would have made if Andrew was there, if they would have had the same sort of. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'd love to know what you think.
So hypotheticals aren't history. However, what we do have, so it's hard to see him as the one not acting in good faith here by declining the invitation, because their understanding of the material was so poor, and they both entered into it with priors. And I know on the biblical, exegetical and theological end, I definitely know less than you do. But I can tell you the political, like they walked in there with political priors, as did their audience. And so I can't imagine a hypothetical in which he would go in there and the conversation would have been helpful. Also, they would have been calling him by the wrong name.
I think Andrew would have been too kind to correct
them.
But yeah, I totally agree with that. And like this can kind of get us into just beyond sort of the as you said, the kind of political priors that they clearly are bringing in just right away. They're both political and theological priors, right? They're coming in. They have an audience that they know is going to kind of like wait on them and accept pretty much everything that they're going to say, right? So once you set things up in this way where it's like, you can trust us because we think this stuff right up front. Don't worry. And we're going to discredit this person right away too, by framing them in a certain way, right? Yeah. At least my first impression going in, it's not that I didn't expect that to happen. It was just how obvious it was that they were doing this, that they were doing this on purpose to discredit somebody and to make themselves sort of appear kind of superior and experts on a topic. And Andrew kind of not really knowing what he's talking about with this. Someone just introducing novel ideas that we would be suspicious of, right?
And in application to a term that we all know what it means. We all know what atonement is. And that is definitely one of the launching points of this conversation, is that their audience, like most people, thinks of atonement in a very specific way, which is its place within Christian theology. I'm just guessing.
No, I think you're right. And I think that's possibly part of the difficulty of somebody like Craig in particular, to be able to kind of follow these, actually follow the arguments that Andrew's making, is because he's not a trained exegete in the way that Andrew is, in the way that most people who are doing this kind of work in biblical studies actually are. So there is just going to be a lack of familiarity with that. That's fine. The issue is when you frame things in a way that you're the authority on this right away, because you're William Lane Craig and you have a book that you published on atonement, and people look to you as this kind of like important figure. who knows a lot about this topic, who has a name and a reputation among a certain, group of Christians, but a fairly large number of Christians. You have, a certain amount of respect that they give you, and you want to maintain that.
I think even more deeply than that, though, like even if he didn't have the book, his appeal to, I'm paraphrasing, but I think what he said was the traditional Christian view on atonement.
Yeah.
Like him repeatedly referring to that. He didn't even have to have a book. Like, come on, we all know what this is. And I know that you and I were texting, and I was saying, like, I remember reading this book, Meaning of the Millennium, and having grown up in a dispensational household, finding out that this is a 4 point of view on the millennium, right? So finding out, like, oh, there's post-millennial, there's amillennial, and then there's historic premillennial. Like, learning that hold on, why was I not told that there are people who think something else, even if I'm still taught the thing that we believe? So this idea that penal substitutionary atonement is the only view that even exists within Christianity. Now, like, you don't even have to penetrate what Hebrew Bible has to say on atonement, and that this may not all be about your individual failings as a human being that necessitate salvation. Like, it all leads back to a theology that we all know this is the traditional view, right? Which a lot of people in the comments are like, talking about the Reformation and things like that on that video. They're like, this isn't very good. They didn't do a very good job of dealing with what Rillera did. And also they're acting as though this particular point of view on atonement is much older and much deeper than it actually is.
Right. And people do try to make that case, especially certain evangelical church historians will try to say, well, there are antecedents to penal substitution, to the extent that, like, it's actually not new. It's actually not as recent as we think it is. And I'm like, well, okay. I'm fine with certain antecedent concepts being within the, like, they don't just pop out of nowhere. Things like, punishment, substitution. They don't suddenly appear. There are going to be long histories that develop into those concepts that get kind of crystallized by the time you get to something like the Reformation, or even, I think, especially the modern period, is where you get a really solidified doctrine of PSA. But that's really all people mean by it's a modern doctrine. In its complete form, it is very, very modern. So at the same time, I do think, to be slightly fair to Craig, he at times will say, and maybe I'm not being fair, at times he'll say, PSA is within this sort of like kaleidoscope, or like part of this kind of jewel that we can kind of see. It's not like the only facet of the significance of Christ's death or anything like that, but it's a central point of it, right? Other times he'll make it seem like it is the only thing, and it's the most important thing, it's the most fundamental thing, and if you remove that, you lose the atonement, right? So it depends on who he's talking to and in what context, where he'll decide either in advance or kind of on the fly which kind of tack he's gonna take. Whether it's gonna be, oh, it's actually within this kind of kaleidoscope of images, or he'll be like, no, it's actually really the heart of the matter. And I think that's kind of what he was doing with Andrew's book. Even though he did reference the jewel imagery, he just asserted that PSA is really the heart of that jewel.
Yeah, I don't know, that I wasn't really sure what to make of the facets thing, so
I don't understand it either, because
I largely just ignored it.
Yeah, and for sure, because usually what that means is, like, you're gonna the theory that you find the most important is going to subsume everything else under, kind of into it, to the point where it's just the theory you already like. You can accent it with certain language from other theories or whatever, but it's really just PSA dressed up in a different kind of manner, right?
Yeah. I think, and they were pretty dismissive, pretty condescending, actually, to this particular point. The idea that the slaughter, because I mean that's what it is, the slaughter of the lamb is not the centerpiece. It's not what the sacrifice is. And in fact, that slaughter is intended to be peaceful. It is intended to be nonviolent, right? It is about extracting the blood because the blood is represented. And I remember pointing this out in the conversation I had with him, is like, that does not track with the understanding that we have of blood being shed, that it is about death, that it is a violent thing. And so the idea that there are requirements within biblical sacrifice, that one, it has to be. So again, to kind of get back to a point that, well, we already know that this is true, that like it's the suffering that matters, even though that's not at all an analog for what we see in Hebrew Bible. Whether you're talking about Passover or you're talking about the purification of the tabernacle, the sanctuary, like none of it jives, and they're okay with just kind of laughing it off. Oh, well, he says this thing about the Lamb of God, very disrespectful, which is another point of like, good job not going on there. Because it was disrespectful.
100%. And I feel like with that, especially it got really interesting when they were going into the kind of procedural stuff, and they were like, just the assumption that like it's clearly the slaughter that's atoning for they just they can't kind of get out of that way of thinking about things. But like, to me, it's like, well, who's slaughtering the animal at that point? It's the person who brought it.
Yeah,
that can't be the sacrifice. If the person who brings it is killing it, if that were the actual moment, the site of atonement, the priest would be doing it, right?
Yeah,
you would think so, given what we know. But no, what the priest does, the atoning stuff, is when the priest takes the blood and also the different meat and entrails and all that, using that in a particular way and manipulating that within the sanctuary, the sancta itself, and putting it and applying it in very particular ways. That's when the atonement happens, right?
Yeah.
And the blood itself within that situation, because death can't actually enter the sancta, which again is a crucial point, the blood has to be reinterpreted within that ritual as a kind of life source. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what they're doing. I don't know why that's so difficult to follow, because blood has an important point there, has a very important function. It is the atoning thing that is the detergent that gets stuff out. So that's important. Blood is important. Just because it's not substituting for the worshiper doesn't mean it's not important. That's the thing that I think some people just can't get to or allow.
And so this is where I'm really proud of teenage Jared for rejecting topical and systematic theology, because when you have a heading, right? So in this case, atonement, and anything that can be fit under that heading should be fit under that heading. And then you start taking biblical texts and combining them to communicate a message, regardless of whether they are actually communicating that message. And it goes back to, I don't even know how many conversations I've had on the podcast where I will point out, even if Christian theology is not explicitly being anti-Semitic, so much of it is just pointed in that direction. The notion that ancient Israelite or Hebrew or Judaism, Jewish religion, was an abortive attempt by God to redeem and forgive humanity is perverse, and it is disgusting, and it leads to these things. And it's just in the DNA of theological and societal and political discourse to an extent that like it gets in the way. So when scholars, and it doesn't have to just be Andrew Rillera, like Eric Harvey was recently, it won't be out until next year, but Eric Harvey just talking about something completely different, but what sacrifice was in adjacent cultures to ancient Israel. And it matches with what we're talking about, but it does not match with the Christian understanding of what it is. So if the presence of Adonai with the people of Israel requires that the sancta be purified or purged, have these impurities removed, it doesn't necessarily have to be linked to human sinfulness. And that's not a thing that these guys are interested in hearing, because it all has to fall within human sinfulness and your forgiveness, yada, yada, yada. Right?
Yep. Yeah. And like relatedly, and like this is something that I thought about the other day, just kind of reflecting on my own on some of the stuff that in the confusion that William Lane Craig and Sean McDowell were clearly experiencing. I do wonder why, on their approach to the OT system, once the animal is slaughtered by the worshiper, if that animal is substituting in for them as their sacrifice in their stead, why is the blood not applied to them? You would think the thing that needs cleansing, if that's the situation that we've already decided, you would think that that would be the place where that would be appropriate to put the blood, is on the person to cleanse them of their impurities. That never happens. Not once. That would be a good, if that were to happen, I would have to be like, yeah, well, seems like there is a substitution happening here. And something, if you want to kind of drill into this more, it could be punitive too. But we never see it. So that's something that's kind of been bothering me about this. It's like, well, if you're right that it is a substitutionary sacrifice for you, something that you did, why isn't your animal's blood applied to you then?
Well, and so,
because if the answer is it violates how the system works, like the actual procedures, then like, yeah, it does. But let's pay attention to how the procedures work.
Yeah.
If you really care about the procedures, we can go into that. But you can't use it as a defense of why, this situation of substitution can't break those. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll stop ranting.
No. I mean, that's why we're here. I think, this is another thing that Andrew brings up, is like the priestly language is not used when we're talking about like the violence and the suffering, but the priestly language is used at places in the New Testament, like Hebrews. And that is Jesus as high priest, and he's in the heavenly sanctuary, applying the blood, presumably where it would have been applied by a priest in the temple in Jerusalem. So I guess more, and maybe memory doesn't serve correctly, if we're talking about Paul, maybe where he's talking about the suffering, he's not talking about the blood as it applies to like removing something. It's a call, like it is a form of leadership to Jesus followers into suffering. And in Hebrews, it is an application that is purifying the sanctuary. And so this gets back to what I was saying, like, if you're sorry if you're trying to systematize everything, and everything has to contribute to these discrete points that you're making on this topic, then you're going to work everything in there, and you're going to leave out the fact that like, oh, well, maybe we don't have a good enough understanding of what Israelite religion vis-a-vis sacrifices meant. And maybe we shouldn't try to say, oh, let's start with what we see in the New Testament and then work our way backward.
Right. And that was something that Craig brought up methodologically as a critique of Andrew's book, was that he starts with the Old Testament system to try and figure out what's going on there, and then going to the
heaven forfend.
It's like, well, I would understand if this was a different topic, like on issues of like, let's say, epistemology, like in terms of how we understand how to, as Christians, to read the Bible, right? Of course, we're going to say it's through Jesus Christ. So it is kind of backward in a certain sense, right? But that's just purely in terms of starting point, just as an exegete, as a person picking up a text that have been handed to us that we're expected to read. under pressure from Jesus. Sure, that's fine. But once you get into very specific things about how the New Testament could possibly transform older concepts, you kind of got to know what those older concepts are.
Yeah.
And how they actually function.
Yeah.
Like just purely logically. And then once you figure that out, you can see quite clearly whether or not, or when and if, certain New Testament authors are using that material and what they're doing with it. Is it keeping in line with what's going on? Are they actually adding stuff in and changing things and transforming it around the Christ event? The answer is yes, they are. But in certain ways, they absolutely are. But you have to know the Old Testament system and procedures first.
Yeah.
To understand how that's actually being transformed. Yeah.
I mean, at a minimum, you should know the narrative.
Yeah. Totally.
Because it's really troubling to not know that narrative. I'm blanking. I just had her name in my head, but I guess referred to John the Baptist in the Gospel of John as like embodied intertextuality, and like you don't benefit from embodied intertextuality if you don't understand the connection between the texts. And so if you, which was advice that I received when I was a teenager, if you just start with John, that's where you start reading your Bible, you miss so much that happens when you pick the story up reading through Hebrew Bible. Even as the story is repeated, you miss a lot of that. Can we talk about the progressive thing? I know that's kind of a...
That was my...
you were going there? Okay. Yeah. I just don't want to waste your whole day, and then I try to shoehorn that into 2 minutes.
Yeah. Why don't you go ahead and just kind of dive into that, and like, kind of your impression of that, how it was brought up, what like how you thought it affected things, all of that. Yeah, I'd love to know.
So I'll refer to a book I've already mentioned, which is Meaning of the Millennium, and I meant to go look this up too. But I think it was the Post-Millennial Advocate in that. I don't know, maybe it was Ladd, I can't remember. But he talks about how progressivism comes from a theological tradition, so that there are post-millennial traditions that see that or believe that the world will continually get better until like the ultimate, the parousia. And I remember kind of as that term emerged, maybe like 15 years ago, sometime in the last 15 years, as like, this is emblematic of the American left. We're rejecting the term liberal, and we're embracing this idea that we're progressives instead. And I was uneasy with that because I had this theological notion in the back of my head. And I'm like, that's not like the historiographical understanding that I have of the world is not that it's just getting better. Mm-hmm. So I'm rejecting that label, which I know makes me look pedantic when people are just trying to talk politics. Like, what are you? But that label was thrown on Rillera, and I know you and others were laughing like, oh yeah, like Stanley Hauerwas, like, and he threw Doug Campbell in there too, Douglas Campbell, like, oh yeah, the progressive Douglas Campbell. But that idea was to say they're overemphasizing love and they're underemphasizing justice.
Yeah.
And that and I'll say we, because I've embraced this reading that like love is the foundational understanding of biblical interpretation, like, through the lens of the resurrected Jesus. But to say like you're overemphasizing love and sacrificing justice makes me, well, a lot of things make me angry because I'm an angry dude, but makes me so angry because it's this idea of justice as an abstract notion, mm-hmm. to which like an infinite, unfettered cosmic consciousness is somehow still bound, and I like, and cannot act outside of these parameters, which is the thought process of abusers, that this is your fault. What am I to do? My hands are tied. If you would just, right, but I'm giving you an out. You don't have to receive this punishment, and here's this alternative, rather than saying, I love you so much, I'll do anything for you. Now, granted, at a, again, infinite cosmic scale, what does that look like? And it is difficult to justify that with the suffering that we see in the world, or to rectify that with the suffering that we see in the world. But it is furthermore attempting to say, okay, so referring to, sorry, I keep plugging my own podcast. So Kirk McGregor, he'll also be I believe he'll be the second episode of 2026 for free. The pro-choice biblical ethic, that's his Journal of Biblical Literature article. And I asked him, so it was basically saying pro-choice biblical ethic was the interpretive scheme that in 1968 pretty much every Protestant at this symposium used with the passages that people apply to abortion. Anyway, I asked him, are there still conservative evangelical scholars who would articulate that point of view? And he said, well, and I kind of already knew that this was the answer. Well, back then, conservative meant you believe in the Trinity and other like traditional doctrines. It did not mean politically conservative, but now it does. Now it means politically conservative. And I think this is like whatever the opposite of a shibboleth is. Referring to someone as a progressive is saying, don't listen to that person. They're not one of us. Right? So now I've been ranting. Does that, maybe I left some loose ends there. I don't know.
No, I think you're exactly right on that. And that was, it made me laugh. Obviously, I did crack up and was like, yeah, for sure. Douglas Campbell, the notable progressive. And then just jokingly being like, have they heard of Stanley Hauerwas? Like the least progressive, like liberal person you'll ever meet politically and theologically. Like he's just not kind of doing any of that. And yet he's very critical of certain concepts of power and the state and all that, which I think are very important things to be critical of as Christians. It doesn't indicate anything about you, your actual political allegiances or whatever. It's, at least for somebody like Stanley, and especially for other people who deploy theological critiques against state power, they run the gamut in terms of actual political commitments, right? So like, I don't know why they latched onto that whole freedom thing, as evidence that he's a progressive, because he's critical of the way that freedom gets used in our kind of contemporary political context, right?
Well, because they didn't read the whole book.
Yeah.
Right?
Maybe they stopped there after that.
Could be.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just progressive, it's leftist.
Yeah.
Slop. Yeah. We don't need to read it. But so I don't know if you've read the book, but there's a book called Criminalization in Acts of the Apostles. So again, I'm plugging my pod. So the author, Jeremy Williams, he and I were talking, and I made a kind of a blasé reference to defund the police as being like, well, what it comes out to, and in the end is just like they want to see the funds used. And he was like, well, no, like defund the police, like, and then he painted a picture of, I want to live in a world without prisons, and that was helpful. Like that was helpful feedback to me.
Yeah,
that the imagination that comes from Christian theology should be predicated on love, and love does not want to see people imprisoned. Love calls you to be in solidarity with those in prison, which, going back to what Andrew's saying, is this is not about substitution, right? This is not about instead of you. This is alongside of you. So yeah, I know Chris Tilling and I had some conversations in the aftermath of the 2024 presidential election where seeing people actively celebrate what we knew was coming, and I think it's probably worse than I pictured it being, but with mass deportation was never going to be anything but violent and punitive and aggressive, even if it was like so precise that it only rolled up people like who it should roll up, it was always going to be violent.
Yep.
But and here to paint the picture, well, what am I supposed to do? Like, they're not here legally. What and that is the attitude, that there is violence and it's deserved, and that's the starting point. Is
Yes.
It's deserved, rather than saying, well, no, love is the starting point. So what does love require of you? Because this thing, the retribution doesn't require that you do anything. Nothing. And I'm talking at a human level. If someone else is attacking a person, you saying like, well, you know, he must have done something to deserve that, rather than to stop that. It's just, I don't know. And then I started thinking about, like, as I knew we were going to have this conversation, I started trying to think about, like, okay, so the Passover thing, like, they weren't saved. Like, so the angel of death, or whatever you want to call it, comes through. They were preserved from that. But the thing they were saved from was the Egyptians. They were saved from slavery. And then I started thinking about, like,
you're right.
The prodigal son, and like the picture of repentance is not the son going back. The picture of repentance is the father embracing him. That these are images. I just don't, John, I don't get it. I don't. It's very simple, but it is also very difficult. It's very simple to be on the side of love, but it's also very difficult. And that's what I feel like that conversation demonstrated, is that they want to believe in a God who's retributive, and they also want to believe that they are inside of the circle that's preserved from that. And that's the end of the story.
Yep. 100%. And just to plug again your conversation with Douglas on Patreon, which you bring up something similar there, same sort of language about love, which is, you know, we tend to want to overcomplicate love, or not want to. Maybe we do so kind of subconsciously, accidentally, when in fact it is simple. But it is hard to actually embody that kind of love and do it, which is part of why I think people resist it so hard. This idea that, like, God is saying to you, you know, I am going to go to the absolute depths to rescue my child, regardless of what you do. I'm going to be there. Like, too bad. I'm going to be there. I'm going to rescue you, right? That's a hard pill to swallow, I think, for some people. It can possibly trigger certain histories, certain memories, sorts of things where they didn't feel like they needed help, when they felt like they were doing fine, and someone came in and was like, no. So just confronting people with that absolute unconditional love, I think, can make some people kind of anxious initially. And then the response to that anxiety feeling is like, no. I don't want to deal with that. That's it's too much. It's too overwhelming. I need to be able to contribute to this in some way. This can't be right.
I think the thing I mentioned, I think it was a Jonathan Edwards essay on the Trinity. And again, I'll go look it up, but he begins from this point of view of like not needing another, that is the perfection. Divine perfection is not needing another. And that's the jumping off point to understand the Trinity. Like, there's perfect satisfaction and self-containment within this, I'll say being, but that's not really the right word. And but it's so, I think it's Paul, an Apostle's biography. I just finished that. I was listening to the audiobook. It's also a Campbell book. But his articulation of the Trinity is fundamentally relational. That is not about cordoning off the divine to where and it's not even about need, but it's about giving, rather than, being self-sufficient, which is such a Western individualistic understanding of the divine, to say like, oh, this is where we started with the Trinity, instead of where Douglas and Chris Tilling will, as like, no, the Trinity is a relational thing, and that is why the call is relational. That you are not a Christian, you are Christians. I guess that may be, I don't know if that's how they put it specifically, but like, you're a community, not a person who's been saved because you sucked and you know that you're not a spider dangling over a fire.
Right.
You're part of a loved creation.
Mm-hmm. And that's been God's purposes. Those have been God's purposes from before all ages, which is secure, because it has been chosen for us before we can even do anything. There's no knocking it off track completely.
Yeah.
Obviously, you get sin and death inexplicably kind of being introduced into the world somehow. I mean, that's a place where that's a difficult point kind of within Scripture. As you sort of brought that up with sort of evil in general. Like the things around us look horrible. So how can we actually confess in this loving God, right?
Yeah.
That is one of the most difficult questions to answer, because I don't think there is one other than I would just say Jesus Christ. Like that's the only thing I can say. I can't give an argument. I can't give sort of like a useful response. I would just have to point to that person and be like, I don't know.
I don't have an argument for it either, but I kind of have a combination of Voltaire and N.T. Wright.
Yeah.
And I know N.T. Wright is not the coolest guy in biblical studies anymore.
Here's the thing. Just before you go on, here's the thing about Wright. We give him a lot of heat, especially people kind of in the apocalyptic camp for certain things. I would never say he's not an insightful, very intelligent, a very important scholar. And he's very helpful, especially with the connection between biblical scholarship and like everyday life, how this gets preached in the pulpits, all that sort of stuff. So just for anyone watching this who thinks I may be just fundamentally an N.T. Wright hater, no,
I didn't think you were a hater. I just didn't know if other people were going to see.
But I just wanted to like
this dork. Yeah. What is it? 2005, and like maybe that's when I read Resurrection of the Son of God. But his like realized eschatology of like, well, we know what the world is supposed to look like, and I think there very much within that is like, you don't have to figure out why the world is the way that it is. Like you can, great, but the more important thing is to live the way the world is supposed to look, or a better way, to tend your garden. So my son is 18 and I try to explain it to him in this way. If you know what you want the world to look like and you know what you should do to get it there, even if that doesn't do it, you know what you've done. And like at the end of the day, you have to be able to look yourself in the mirror. You have to be able to put your head on the pillow. And if you can say, I did my best and I could sleep easy, or I didn't do my best, but I know what it means to do my best and I'll try again tomorrow, that may be all you get. But also, I mean, love is changing dirty diapers. This is my cleaned up version. Love is changing dirty diapers, and it's the thing you don't want to do, right? Love is not the things you feel, it's the things that you do. And so if we can love one another and love the world, does it matter if you figure out what the source of the evil is? Like if you're not contributing to it, if you're trying to do better, if you're, like Watership Down, like if you're trying to find the new place, if you're, I'm thinking of that because we both mentioned Hauerwas and his essay on Watership Down, which is what he and I discussed when he came on the podcast. I love it. And I think about that a lot. So if the story that you tell yourself and others is the one that gets you to the place you need to be, I don't know how many of the details you need to work out. And that's, look, I think about this stuff. We've had conversations offline about the troubling things in the world. I think about this stuff all the time. And I also know I can't do anything about a lot of it directly anyway. So I hope that doesn't come across as fatalism, but yeah, tend your garden. Yeah. And I like what your wife said about N.T. Wright, that he's like baby's first biblical studies.
Yeah.
It's apt. He's
baby's first biblical scholar. Yeah,
that's what it is. Yeah. He's a great introduction to a lot of these things, and a lot of his, like attempting to pivot against the way that you've always been taught a thing is really helpful. So he is a good communicator, but
very much so.
I hope I didn't just ramble.
None at all.
Were we actually productive?
Yeah, I think here too, like I do wonder, just kind of going back to thinking about Craig and McDowell, the whole way that they framed it. Obviously, for those who haven't watched the conversation that they had, you can. You can also go to my videos and watch me kind of watch along and get really disappointed and then just read stuff from Andrew's book. You can do that, which is basically what I did. Thinking about that, I don't have a lot of experience sort of with evangelicalism, or like apologetic kind of culture, I guess, within that. If that's even a thing, or if I just made that up, apologetic culture.
No, you did not.
Okay. I wonder if you can give us some insight, as far as you know, on what this potentially is revealing about kind of evangelical apologetics and how it operates in general. Like, especially in terms of like engaging things that seem new to, or would seem new to most of an apologetic sort of audience, right? What do you see this as revealing about how they, whether consciously or not, I want to kind of give them the benefit of the doubt, even though I don't need to. What do you think this says about the kind of state of apologetics as far as your perception of those things? Not like currently necessarily, but like how you've experienced those things in your history.
So kind of juxtaposing it to what it was like 25-ish years ago. And I know I mentioned this in a phone conversation we had. My first exposure to William Lane Craig was on the Bible Answer Man radio show. For younger people, Google Radio. It's like a podcast, but you had to be there.
I'll put the link in the description for that.
Okay.
For an image. Yeah.
And so Peg Hanegraaff, who was the Bible, I don't know if he still is, but who was the Bible Answer Man back then, his thing was mnemonic devices. So it would be like the face that demonstrates the farce of evolution, right? And face is an acrostic for the things you need to memorize. And I probably still have them mostly. I just don't need to dig that back up. So I'm going to leave. Or the feet that demonstrate the fact of resurrection. And he would write that, and it was about memorization. Or there would be like evangelism techniques like the Roman Road, which I pretty much can still recite. Or I remember I did Evangelism Explosion, and they're all about memory techniques for you to engage in a conversation to bring people to faith or to argue against something like evolution, right? Or for the, the historicity of the resurrection. I don't see so much of that anymore. I see it in debate tactics. So it definitely does kind of comport with the idea that conservative evangelicals have merged much more tightly with a partisan politics, because the style of debate is very much like, I keep seeing clips of this guy Destiny talking to I don't know why I'm blanking on his name now either. Dinesh D'Souza. Talking to okay, so
that was very recent, wasn't it? Like,
it must have been, because I keep seeing a bunch of them on Instagram. So a topic gets brought up, and then a question is raised. Well, how much money did come in from the tariffs? And so D'Souza will ask that, and Destiny will be like, well, I think it's in the ballpark. Oh, so you don't know. And it's all about just kind of throwing people off the trail. So there's never really like a vision articulated. And I think that's very much what's happening here in this conversation. They're saying, we all know what atonement is. You've heard it in sermons. You've read it in your study Bible. You don't have to think beyond that. And this book is a waste of your time. Like, this is an anti-ad for this book. And when you read the comments under the video, you can tell who has and who hasn't read the book. Because the people engaging with like, hey, you're not bringing up this, you're not bringing up this, you're not bringing up this, they've read or engaged in some way with the material. So I'm not even saying that like being in a political coalition is a bad thing. But I'm just saying, because of that, evangelicals have kind of become more mainstream, and that overlap of discourse is not so much about mnemonic devices to remember the thing that you're articulating to either share or defend your faith. It is now, well, no, we've cordoned this off, and you don't have to let anybody in who's not approved. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
100%.
That's how I see it anyway.
I mean, I think it's part of what you were saying that is so common, not just simply outside of like, Christian conservative apologetics, but it's something that like I think a lot of us struggle with too, is othering people. we do tend to kind of like flip over into this kind of way of thinking about people, and sometimes there are like legitimate like safety reasons for keeping certain people at a distance, right?
Sure, yeah.
Of course, but those are exceptions. I think like we shouldn't be going through the world thinking about it in terms of being divided up between like in groups and out groups. How is that helpful to anybody? How is that useful in the light of the love that we see revealed in Christ? If we're actually taking that sort of stuff seriously, how can we honestly and in good faith use those kinds of apologetic kind of strategies or conversational strategies to distance people and to try to like make sure that our audience knows that like they should be distanced from them too? Like, yeah. We can't, like, to me, that's like a non-starter. That cannot be how we approach things at all.
So I mentioned my son is 18, and
yeah,
a recent foray into adulthood for him has been vehicle maintenance.
Yeah,
so he went to a place and there were some problems that definitely needed to be fixed. So those were being addressed. And then they told him the battery in particular. They were like, yeah, man, this battery, it doesn't have that much longer. It's going to go soon. I was like, okay, well, we're going to go to like an auto parts store.
Yeah. And
just check it.
And then, yeah. Get the code right. Yep.
And then we'll just buy a battery and we'll change it. And then we can just give them the old one. And it's super easy. And you'll learn how to do that, So we went up there yesterday. I still have the socket wrench here because I haven't put it back in the garage.
Nice.
So, I'm like, we'll take a socket wrench and we'll knock this out. No big deal. You'll learn how to do it. So I go in and get some windshield wipers and I'm like, you talk to the guy, you handle this. And the guy goes and he's like, no, man, you're good. Like it's nowhere near. So I was like, okay. When we got back in the car, I was like, here's the thing, man. I don't want you to think that you should just be going around not trusting people. But when it comes to something where someone's trying to sell you something, this is the difference between someone being interested in being believable and someone being interested in being believed. They want you to believe them. And that's their job. They want to sell stuff. They want to upsell you. They want you to do more maintenance on your vehicle because it brings in more money. And that's not bad, but you will become jaded. You will become cynical if you persist in believing that they're all lying to you. So approaching communication in a way that like you stay aware of what the intent of that engagement is for is going to be a helpful, principled way of engaging with other people. And that's the case, whether it's my relationship with him or my relationship with coworkers or my relationship with you. That and it doesn't necessarily keeping everybody at arm's length, but there are people you want to keep at arm's length. But I think looking at it, so I've had this conversation with a lot of people, and I'm still astounded at how few share my view on this. I give money to homeless people when I have money.
Yep.
And they're like, well, what if they, and I'm like, I'm going to stop you right there. I don't care. It's not my business. It doesn't matter to me. What do you want me to say? And then that goes back to the justice thing, because like these people, well, I'm bound by the idea that they're going to do something wrong with this, that they're going to abuse this, that they're going to abuse me. So I hope that my son at 18 can learn some of these things about engaging with people who want money from you, or who want attention from you, or who want power from you, which is ultimately why people will do this othering in the first place. Like, why push people outside of the boundary? Well, because it validates and perpetuates the power, whether that's wealth or whatever, that you already have. And that's the system that evangelicals live in. And look, for, I'm 42, and I think you're younger than I am. For our whole lives, though, like, conservative evangelical Christians have been moving toward the mainstream. They are mainstream. They are powerful people in this country, and now they're in a preservation phase. So of course they will. They're legitimately going to lose it if they give it up, and they don't want to lose it. Yeah, kind of.
I agree. No, I think to kind of add on to that, something that David Bentley Hart says in his book that all shall be saved. Obviously, talking specifically about whom he calls infernalists, people who believe in eternal hell, and certain sorts of arguments to kind of back that kind of position up. There is a kind of like gated community kind of feel to how a lot of Christians think about Christianity, where it is this sort of like neat fence that we can sort of police and keep people in and let people in if they do the right sorts of thing, if they behave correctly, if they believe the right things, if they talk like you, if they, all of that sort of stuff. And the moment that Christianity gets turned into a gated community, we've just lost the plot. Like, that's never been like, that does not resemble anything that Jesus is embodying and teaching and any of that sort of stuff. Even though Paul can get kind of aggressive at certain times, I literally do not think he is the kind of gatekeeper of like a kind of gated community thing, right? You have good evidence of him being like, especially in the Corinthian correspondence, someone unfortunately sleeping with their stepmother, right? They get cast out for a bit so that their flesh gets burned away, but the hope is that they get reintegrated back in through that kind of healing process. That's a very different way of thinking about, communities and what it means when you kind of step out of line in relation to other people that you love, right?
Yeah. The gated community thing reminds me of someone who I think is coming out of some public debates right now looking very good is Phil Vischer, the VeggieTales guy.
VeggieTales, yeah.
There's the gated community song. I remember watching that with my son when he was little. That guy, man, he has planted his flag, and I gotta say, like, hats off to you, sir. You're doing a remarkable job of saying, like, hey, aren't we supposed to be kind? Yeah. Like, I don't think I like this being vicious and mean, and so actually, which reminds me, there was a motivation. I don't talk about it much for the podcast. That like kind of a counter thing, and that was Jordan Peterson. Like, hearing Jordan Peterson talk about biblical texts, I was just like, this is the silliest nonsense, and people are just eating it up. And I mean, as someone who had stepped away from his faith, I was like, even I can't abide this. even I'm not okay with this. Yeah, man. I don't want to eat up all day. I'll talk to you all day if you want.
No. Yeah, I think, I mean, we've covered pretty much everything I wanted to talk about. I think I've just going back to just PSA in particular, real quick. I think this would be a good point to kind of end on and chat about, because I don't really know the answer to this. I have my hunches. Considering everything we've been talking about with apologetics, with kind of in general, with Sean, with William Lane Craig talking about Andrew's book, being very insistent on the historical Christian account of atonement, right? What is your sense of why a lot of people think that PSA is such a hallmark of the Christian faith? Do you have any sense of where that comes from? Why is this such a central account of the atonement for so many people?
Because, I mean, short answer, because retribution is so easy.
Mm.
And when they look out their window, look, this is to kind of take us far afield. People, I think it's like over 80% of people support term limits. The only thing more popular than term limits in this country is reelecting incumbents.
Mm.
So one of those is
Yeah,
over 80% bipartisan. The other one is over 90% bipartisan.
bipartisan. Yeah.
So how is it that those two, like there is no way that the people who are in favor of term limits are not also voting for incumbents. It just statistically, I failed 6th grade, and I know that doesn't work. It's that of the 435 members of the House, it's the other ones that they don't like. And those are the ones who should be restricted. And I think that's very much what it is. I think it's looking outside your window and like, ugh, the world's just going to hell. And it's deserved because it's outside of you, because you have shut yourself off.
I don't have much to add to that because I do think it is this sort of. I think part of what I would say is I think it feels natural to buy into an idea of just in general power having a sort of reach that is retributive and violent. Like we're totally so many people are totally fine with state violence. Like that's the acceptable form of violence for most people. Right?
It's not even violence.
Yeah, it doesn't count, right?
Yeah.
Of course, the same sorts of people who are just sort of take that for granted are also very violent themselves, or at least have associations with things that can be extremely violent. Correct, especially when we have a whole gun culture in our country, right? In terms of protection and power. What are you talking? What am I
live in Texas. What do you mean?
Yeah. I do. Yeah, I think there is the sort of just default acceptance of state violence, and then that's just in the water. So anytime we think about something or some being that is very, very powerful, it's very easy to kind of just insert what we know, what we sort of take for granted, just projecting that into God at that point. Yep. And then something like PSA turns out to work perfectly, right? Mm-hmm. You get this satisfaction of that. God the Father executes his Son. That wrath gets absorbed. You get to go free. If you have faith, if you do something, then you're good to go.
Which I always do, right? I just, by the grace of God, there before the grace of God. Yeah, that kind
of. I think, that's something that bothers me to no end, as you probably know, is this PSA stuff. I should mention, I'm glad I remembered this. I'll put this in the description of the video. Before we, let me leave myself a note real quick. Jared, thank you so much for coming on as I write this. Do you have any final things you want to say?
I don't know if what you were going to bring up was the discount code for Beyond Justification.
It is.
But that'll be in the show notes, y'all.
Okay, cool. I'll put that in there. It's so Beyond Justification, Liberating Paul's Gospel, which came out in January of 2024, is on sale for, I believe it's $2.50, an ebook version of that.
So I'm going to make this reference because I know that you're a Simpsons fan, and I think about this a lot. There was a Super Bowl episode where they were in the bar and they were talking about watching the Super Bowl, and they're like, I wonder if, and they would lift their mug to their mouth and it would be a completely different voice.
Yes.
President Clinton is going to watch it with his wife, Hillary. Yeah. So I think, I sure hope the Atlanta Falcons. So I feel like you should do that.
If I'm wrong, I will. Yeah.
But have somebody else record the price, and
I'll definitely
just dub that in.
Perfect. Yeah. Anyway, it's cheap, very cheap, with a discount code that I'll also provide for those who like to use ebooks. And it's a nice is there such a thing as an stocking stuffer? Is that a real thing?
I hope not.
Yeah. Well,
I hope not. AI just started thinking about it.
Yeah. Oh, good point.
Because it hurt us.
Yeah, it does. It knows all. Yeah. Hi, Nathan. I haven't seen you for a while. The whole project isn't just a complete waste of time that gets in the way of Christianity doing any good, and I want to go. I want to go. Yeah.
I want to go
Well,
away.
same. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully this will be kind of our last word on Craig, on Lamb of the Free and Andrew's stuff. I don't know if there's much more to say about this because he's clearly moved on. A lot of people have kind of moved on. I'll be curious to see the response of Andrew's response to Derek Rishmawi's review his book online, because I know he has a certain amount of sway with certain circles of evangelicalism. So I'll be looking at that. But beyond that, I probably won't have any more to say about this. But
better knock on wood.
Yeah. But thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it.
Me.
This was fun to just hang out, have a chat about this, because obviously, as you mentioned, we've been texting and jumping on calls together for a while now, and then finally got to a point where we could make this happen. And hopefully this was useful for people to think through. I know we have about 10 people on, but cool. Well,
you're welcome back on my podcast whenever you want to come on. So just shoot me a text. And
let me know. I absolutely will, because I've got this book project, so I'm trying to finish that needs to get done in the next couple of months. But yeah, this was a great discussion to have on the fourth Sunday of Advent, because it's really all about love. And what you kept bringing up today was pointing us back to that love, and that love revealed in Jesus. And you were one of the few people, I think, in this kind of space who are actually really, really committed to that as the starting point and the end point of how you think about all of this stuff. So,
well, John, that's because I have no expertise, so I have to have something.
Neither do I. So,
okay, all right, we're done. See you, man.
All right. With that, this has been Apocalypse Here, Christianity you can live with. Thanks, everyone.